Japan is a country that shows you exactly what it wants you to see. The temples, the cherry blossoms, the perfect sushi, the train that arrives within 4 seconds of schedule. The surface is immaculate, designed to be exactly as impressive as it appears. But underneath that surface, sometimes literally underneath it, Japan is operating at a scale that most people never register. Things that look small are enormous. Things that seem simple have layers running 30 years deep. Things that appear to have ended are still running, just out of sight. This is the list of things in Japan that are way, way bigger than they seem. And we're going to start with the most staggering one first. Number 15. The Tokyo Underground is a parallel city that no one has fully mapped. Tokyo's travel guides skim the surface. Beneath them lies a second city, quiet, sprawling, and only partly acknowledged. The official subway, run in part by Tokyo Metro, already feels immense. Hundreds of stations, kilometers of track, a circulatory system for one of the world's largest cities. But journalist Shun Akiba suggested the public map is only a draft. In his research, the visible network might account for just 60% of what exists. He described parallel tunnels with no listed purpose, and a passage once recorded beneath the Prime Minister's residence leading toward Kokai Gijidomai Station, later erased from official records. At some junctions, lines that should intersect appear to avoid each other, hinting at unseen layers. Authorities admit to hidden emergency stockpiles along the Uedo line, but keep locations secret. When parts are confirmed yet concealed, the absence of a full map begins to feel deliberate. Estimates suggest roughly 10% more tunnels than documented. In Tokyo, that margin is not trivial. It is another city folded into the dark. Number 14. The Yakuza is still operating. It just went corporate. The popular image of the Yakuza is outdated, and that is precisely the point. The tattoos, the missing fingers, the idling vans outside pachinko parlors form a version of organized crime Japan can comfortably point to as fading. Membership in groups like the Yamaguchi Gumi has dropped sharply since the 1990s, and headlines echo a narrative of decline. But that visible contraction hides a quieter revolution. Researchers studying Keizai Yakuza, or economic organized crime, describe a strategic shift rather than a collapse. As laws tightened, many groups dissolved their formal offices and reappeared inside legitimate industries: construction, waste management, real estate, labor services. The structure changed, the incentives did not. During the economic stagnation of the 1990s, these networks acquired distressed assets while conventional investors hesitated. Later scandals involving failed education firms and healthcare providers revealed similar patterns, where large sums quietly vanished behind corporate facades. After the 2011 Tohoku earthquake and tsunami, the Yamaguchi Gumi delivered aid faster than official channels in some areas, gaining public visibility. The shift is subtle but decisive. The Yakuza did not disappear. It adapted, trading street presence for corporate opacity. Number 13. The population collapse is happening faster than the official numbers. Admit, Japan's demographic crisis is visible, discussed, and still profoundly underestimated. The headline figures are stark: a fertility rate near 1.2, births falling below 760,000, far from the 2.1 replacement level. Institutions like National Institute of Population and Social Security Research track these trends closely. But the deeper issue is the acceleration effect. Each smaller generation produces an even smaller one, even if behavior does not worsen. Japan entered this loop decades ago. It is now compounding. In rural regions, decline is not gradual. It is disappearance. Over 10 million vacant homes, known as akiya, increase by hundreds of thousands annually. Some towns give them away, others pay people to take them. Entire communities in Tohoku and Shikoku are shrinking towards single-digit populations. A 2022 government study projected certain municipalities could reach zero residents within 15 years. The quiet, unresolved question is infrastructure. Systems like the Shinkansen require precision and constant maintenance. As the workforce contracts, continuity becomes uncertain. The trains still run on time. The future operator remains undefined. Number 12, Mount Fuji is considered an active volcano, and the government has a secret evacuation plan for Tokyo. Most people think of Mount Fuji as a symbol, a postcard image, a mountain climbed by tourists in August. The Japanese government thinks of it as a time bomb and has been quietly updating the blast radius map since 2004. Fuji's last eruption was in 1707 during the Hoei period. It lasted 2 weeks and deposited several centimeters of volcanic ash across the Kanto region, including what is now Tokyo. Volcanologists classify it as active, not dormant, active. A 2022 report from Japan's Cabinet Office, reported with notable restraint in Japanese media, revised upward the estimated ash fall from a modern eruption to 10 centimeters or more across most of the greater Tokyo metropolitan area. 10 centimeters of ash paralyzes modern infrastructure completely. Electrical systems fail. Water treatment plants shut down. The road surface becomes physically impassable. Aircraft cannot fly. In the Tokyo metro area, which hosts 37 million people and the densest transit network on Earth, the cascade effects of even a medium-scale Fuji eruption are modeled internally by government agencies and not released to the public in their full form, because the models are, by government admission, too alarming for public communication. The classified portion of the contingency planning reportedly includes pre-positioned fuel reserves, alternate command structures that would operate from outside the Kanto region, and agreements with JR and private rail operators about the sequence of evacuation priorities. The public-facing evacuation plan exists. The full version does not. Fuji is gorgeous. It is also, in the language of the Geological Survey authorities themselves, overdue. Number 11, the convenience store system is essentially running part of the government. The relationship between Japan's konbini chains and the Japanese state is not commonly described in terms that reflect how deep it actually runs. By formal agreement with the Cabinet Office, the three major konbini chains, 7-Eleven Japan, Family Mart, and Lawson, are designated as critical infrastructure in Japan's National Disaster Response Framework. In the event of a major earthquake, typhoon, or other national emergency, these chains are legally obligated to maintain operations in affected areas where physically possible, prioritize supply chains to disaster zones over commercial delivery schedules, and share real-time inventory and logistics data with government emergency management systems. This is not a marketing partnership. It is a governance relationship. The Konbini Network's logistics infrastructure, 55,000 stores nationally, daily delivery routes that touch virtually every populated area of Japan, refrigeration and supply chains maintained to pharmaceutical standards, is built into the national emergency response architecture. In areas where municipal governments have been hollowed out by rural depopulation, konbini have by default become the primary points of contact between residents and commercial, financial, and information services. In some rural communities, they are the only functioning economic institution within practical travel distance. The government doesn't run the convenience stores, but the convenience stores are running some functions that, in other countries, would be considered government responsibilities. The difference is narrow and narrowing. Number 10. Japanese organized religion is sitting on more money than most countries. Religious organizations in Japan are not required to disclose their financial holdings, pay taxes on property, or file public accounts. This is a structural feature of Japanese law, not an oversight, and it has allowed certain institutions to accumulate assets over centuries of tax-free operation at a scale that is genuinely difficult to quantify. The major Buddhist sects and Shinto shrine networks collectively hold real estate that some estimates place as the single largest category of untaxed land ownership in Japan. Certain individual temples have balance sheets that, if they were corporations, would qualify them for inclusion in Japan's stock exchange. Soka Gakkai, the Buddhist lay organization that founded the Komeito political party, has assets estimated by various analysts at between $100 billion and $200 billion, making it one of the wealthiest non-governmental organizations on Earth by any measure, though it has never been required to confirm or deny these figures publicly. The Komeito connection is not incidental. Komeito has been a coalition partner in the Japanese government for most of the last 25 years. The philosophical independence of Japanese religious institutions from political influence is simultaneously difficult to prove and difficult to disprove. What can be said is this: the entities sitting on the most undisclosed wealth in Japan have spent the longest time closest to political power. In most countries, that pattern would generate more scrutiny. In Japan, the temples are very beautiful, and the accounts are very private. Number 9. The real cost of Fukushima has never been fully disclosed. The official cleanup cost estimate from TEPCO and the Japanese government currently stands at approximately 21 trillion yen, roughly $200 billion. The IAEA's independent assessments have repeatedly called this figure unrealistically low. Japanese government researchers using TEPCO's own decommissioning timeline project the actual process extending past 2050, with significant technical problems remaining unsolved, including the removal of approximately 880 tons of melted reactor fuel using technology that has not yet been invented. The part that receives insufficient attention, the mechanism by which the Japanese government effectively transferred the financial liability of a private corporation's catastrophic failure to the Japanese public, is one of the most significant acts of economic restructuring in post-war Japanese history. TEPCO was not allowed to go bankrupt. It was placed under a government-managed framework that kept it technically solvent while injecting public funds and separating clean liabilities from disaster liabilities. The full exposure of the Japanese public to Fukushima-related costs, cleanup, compensation, decommissioning, health monitoring, has never been consolidated into a single public figure, because doing so would require acknowledging that the number is, in official government terms, currently incalculable. The water being released into the ocean gets reported on. The number that can't be reported on is what the full accounting will eventually say. Number 8. Japan is the world's largest creditor nation, and no one treats it like one. Japan is the largest holder of U.S. Treasury bonds of any foreign nation. It holds net foreign assets of over $3 trillion, making it the world's largest creditor country by a significant margin, a position it has held continuously for over 30 years. This means that the global financial system has a structural dependency on Japan's savings rate, capital allocation decisions, and monetary policy that is almost never discussed in those terms in Western media. When the Bank of Japan adjusts its yield curve control policy, a technical-sounding decision about how much the central bank will allow interest rates to rise, the resulting carry trade unwind can produce volatility across U.S. equities, European bonds, and emerging market currencies simultaneously. This happened in August 2024, when a relatively modest Bank of Japan rate adjustment triggered the largest single-day drop in Japanese equities since 1987 and produced significant volatility in markets across the globe. Japan doesn't talk about this leverage loudly. Japan doesn't talk about its leverage at all. The country that most resembles the structural description of a global financial superpower presents itself publicly as a cautious, internally focused economy, still recovering from its own lost decade. The presentation is not inaccurate. It is also not complete. Japan is the quiet majority shareholder in the global financial system, and it has never once called a board meeting. Number 7. The Hikikomori situation is multiple times larger than reported. Hikikomori, the phenomenon of extreme social withdrawal in which individuals retreat entirely from social participation for periods of 6 months or more, has been studied, reported on, and discussed as a distinctly Japanese social phenomenon since psychiatrist Tamaki Saito coined the term in 1998. The government's official estimate of hikikomori in Japan has been revised upward several times and currently stands at approximately 1.5 million individuals. Independent researchers, social workers, and the organizations providing support to affected families believe the real number is between 3 and 5 million. The discrepancy exists because official counting requires formal contact with support services, which the defining characteristic of hikikomori makes extremely unlikely. What gives the number its real weight is the age distribution. Early coverage focused on young men in their 20s. The 2023 government survey found that over half of reported hikikomori were over 40 years old. This is not a youth crisis anymore. This is a cohort of people who withdrew during Japan's economic downturn of the 1990s and have never re-emerged. Some have been in social isolation for over 20 years. Their parents, now in their 70s and 80s, are often the only social contact they have. When those parents die, the question of what happens to these adults has no institutional answer. Japan has a word for this. They always do. The scenario is called 8050, an 80-year-old parent supporting a 50-year-old child in isolation. It is already common. It is accelerating. And most of the people in that situation have never been counted in the figure you see in the news article. Number 6. The Japanese countryside is being quietly bought by foreign buyers. At a scale that has alarmed the government between 2010 and 2023, foreign entities, primarily Chinese companies and investment vehicles, but also entities from other countries, purchased approximately 7,000 hectares of Japanese forest land, largely in Hokkaido and rural prefectures, near water sources and military facilities. The specific concern that drove the Japanese government to pass new legislation in 2021, requiring advance notification of land purchases near designated security zones, was the location pattern of the acquisitions. The purchases were not clustered around ski resorts or scenic viewpoints, which would be the commercial logic for foreign investment in Hokkaido. They were disproportionately concentrated around self-defense force facilities, water infrastructure, and areas with strategic industrial significance. The 2021 law, the Foreign Land Transaction Reporting Act, applies only to land within 1 kilometer of a restricted facility and has no enforcement mechanism beyond reporting. The land that was already purchased before the law passed is not subject to it. As of the legislation's passage, the Japanese government acknowledged that it had no comprehensive picture of who currently owned what land near sensitive facilities, because prior to 2021, no such records were required. The Hokkaido governor described the situation publicly as a problem we noticed too late. In a country where almost every domestic process runs on meticulous record-keeping, the absence of records is itself the story. Number 5. Japan's fishing fleet is operating at a scale that satellite tracking has only recently revealed. Japan is one of the world's largest consumers of seafood and one of its largest fishing nations. The official fleet, registered vessels operating under Japanese flags, represents what the trade statistics record. What satellite-based fishing vessel monitoring has increasingly revealed since around 2018 is that vessels operating in the broader network of Japanese fishing interests, including vessels flying flags of convenience with Japanese ownership structures and processing relationships, represent a significantly larger footprint in international waters. Global Fishing Watch, which monitors vessel transponder signals globally, has documented extended periods where vessels with Japanese processing relationships operate in international waters with transponders switched off, a practice known as going dark that regulators interpret as deliberate avoidance of tracking. The waters most affected are in the Pacific and around certain island chains where overlapping territorial claims create enforcement ambiguity. This is not unique to Japan. China, South Korea, and several other major fishing nations have similar documented patterns. What makes Japan's situation distinctive is the gap between the country's carefully maintained international reputation for sustainable seafood sourcing and the documented behavior of the broader operational network. Japanese consumers pay premium prices at domestic markets based partly on assurances of sustainable and legal origin. The supply chain connecting those assurances to the actual behavior of vessels in international waters at night, with transponders off, has gaps in it that the industry has preferred not to illuminate. Number 4. Tokyo Disneyland is not owned by Disney. This one is small compared to some of the entries on this list, but it surprises almost everyone who hears it, because it reveals how much of the Japan as Western Mirror story is actually Japan operating on its own terms. Tokyo Disneyland and Tokyo Disney Sea are not owned by the Walt Disney Company. They are owned, built, operated, and financed entirely by a Japanese company called Oriental Land Company, which licenses the Disney brand and characters from the American parent company. Disney receives royalties. Oriental Land owns everything else: the land, the buildings, the rides, the hotels, the management structure. This matters because Oriental Land has consistently outperformed every Disney-operated park globally on guest experience metrics. The parks run with a level of cleanliness, staff training, and operational precision that characterizes top-tier Japanese service culture, which is to say, at a level that Disney's own parks frequently fail to match. Tokyo Disney Sea was rated by TripAdvisor as the best theme park in the world for 8 consecutive years, a period during which it was operated by a company that many of its visitors assumed was American. The rumor that has circulated in industry circles for years, unconfirmed but persistent, is that the Walt Disney Company has studied the Oriental Land operational model extensively and has been structurally unable to replicate it, because the gap is not a process gap. It is a culture gap. The thing that makes Tokyo Disneyland better than Disneyland is the same thing that makes Japanese train stations, garbage trucks, and hotel rooms better than their equivalents elsewhere. You cannot license that. And Disney, to its credit, tried.